Thank you for
Okay.
joining us for another Hagley History Hangout. My name is Gregory Hargreaves, Assistant Director of the Center for the History of Business, Technology, and Society at the Hagley Museum and Library in Wilmington, Delaware. Now, as you know, during these history hangouts, we like to bring you some of the great work being done by scholars who have used the historical collections held in the Hagley Library. One such scholar joins me today. Yaxi Liu is a PhD candidate at the University of Oxford. Yaxi, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Thank you for having me today.
Oh, you're welcome. Let's start by painting with broad strokes, so to speak. What is it you're researching and writing about?
Okay. My research is about acrylic fiber. As you know, it's all from Dupont. But what I'm focused on is acrylic fiber in China. From the 1960s to 80s, in this 20 years, China received technology transfer from Dupont in 1980s, and at the same time got technology assistance from one British manufacturer called Cotot. So basically, the story is about cross border technology transfer, culture transfer. So this is my PhD project.
Mhm. And what brought plastic to your attention as a focus for your research?
Well, firstly, because this is really the first acrylic fiber is really first material for the PRC, People of Republic China, engage in the global business in a very huge scale. Because because in the 1950s, it's mostly about doing business with Soviet blocks. So in the 60s, this is the first time to import the technology from the Western world. So it's gave me a lot inspiration, or it draw me attention because it's really the first time how China domesticate, how to process, how to localize this foreign technology, not only in technological level, but also in political, ideological, and culture level. So that's the reason why I focus on this material. But in fact, this material actually not very popular now, already been replaced by many other synthetic fibers like polyester, nylon. So, yeah.
Yeah, could you perhaps explain what is acrylic fiber?
Well, acrylic fiber is kind of like a synthetic fiber processed from oil. Basically, the primary component is about acrylonitrile. Acrylonitrile is derived from the oil, but in the meantime, it also polymerized with other two components can enhance the durability or mechanical strength of this fiber. But in general, actually, there are like dozens of different technical bases for producing acrylic fiber. For example, Orlon from Dupont is very different. Actually, it's very different from the rest acrylic fiber in 60s, 70s, because it's basically based on the dry spinning technology. So the equipment, also the polymerizing recipe quite different. Also, the end product have very different texture. Probably, I guess, because I didn't really compare all the acrylic fiber in the 1960s, but I guess in the past, DuPont's Orlon can be more have a more different, more wider qualities, like just like cotton also can be similar with wool. But the acrylic fiber from China is very, very limited to wool-like fiber, not really like a cotton quality. So hopefully this can
Oh,
clarify what's that.
mhm,
Yeah.
right. Well, what was it about this particular material that made it a candidate to be transferred into the PRC and to really be one of the very first examples of this?
Um, Sorry, can you say your question again?
Yeah, what was it about acrylic fiber that made it the first technology to be
Ah,
transferred to the PRC in this way?
oh, okay. I think the primary reason is a diplomatic reason
Mm,
because during the early 1960s, China has kind of like a okay diplomatic relation with Great Britain and the West European country. So that make this acrylic fiber enter China. And at that time, even though, for example, polyester, nylon also could be a possible product introduced from Western world. But during that time, the UK didn't control better polyester technology. That's the reason why China imported acrylic fiber. Also in 1980s, China's relation with the US improved a lot. That's also the reason why China imported a lot equipment from Dupont and technical basis from Dupont to develop its own acrylic fiber.
mm. Well, what technologies in particular were necessary to build this industry?
I think the most important one is polymerization.
Mm,
Because for China, it didn't have any polymerizing technique for mass producing plastics or synthetics. Also, it's very challenging for China because you have to have equipment, a machine to process high pressure liquid or high pressure chemicals in high pressure ways. So that's kind of like a very difficult challenge in the past. Besides that, another challenge is about the downstream manufacturing. For example, in 1960, 70, Chinese textile mills using the equipment machine actually from 1940s or even 30s. It's like 30 years ago. So those equipment probably mostly from Japan. So they only work very good for processing cotton, but not for acrylic fiber, not for any synthetic fiber. So the worker play a very important role. So they fix the machine and they modify the strength of machine to make sure it can process this new fiber. So I think this polymerization and the downstreamer machine were very challenging part for the China to process this
mm.
acrylic fiber.
You mentioned a moment ago that this acrylic fiber, this new plastic material, gained political and cultural resonance, meanings in
Yeah.
China once it was introduced. Could you
Yeah.
perhaps explain that a little bit?
Okay. Politically, this material controlled by the central government,
Mm,
controlled by the state for at least 20 years. At that time, the government name it as a strategic material because on the one hand, it can replace cotton for clothing the population because at that time, people doesn't have a lot of cotton to clothe the people. And on the other hand, this material can be used for the state to develop the global business. For example, exporting fabrics or yarns to the other country for making money, for making foreign currency in the 70s. So this is in political level. It's very different from Dupont's because Dupont, as I research in Hagley archive, I noticed actually it's very commercialized. It's not like China monopolized the material and only give it one way to develop. So that's kind of like a political level. And for the cultural level, it's very interesting. I noticed even though ordinary people cannot access this material very easily in 1970s, also 80s also very difficult, but they can access the wasted acrylic fiber from the state-owned factory, which means the state-owned factory could not process the fiber with old machines, so they just throw away. Also because this fiber not very good quality, very hard, very tough to use, so they just throw away. But a lot of rural manufacturer They're trying to recycle this wasted fiber and use it in their production. And then in this way, Chinese ordinary consumer finally in 1980s get acrylic fiber made yarns or jumpers, sweaters, socks. So this in the cultural level. So in the cultural level, more about recycling.
Mm.
So that's kind of like a very, I think it's a very, very contradict with the political story. One is holding the other one, trying to subverting the monopolized control and finally get this material.
Mhm.
So
What did access to synthetics mean to the everyday consumer in China?
Um, well, actually, in before 1980s, it means very pricey, expensive, inaccessible, luxury. But after 1980s, because those rural manufacturers already made this material to the public, they feel this material is cheap, is low cost. It's only because the rural manufacturers' social status very low. So it's because the discriminating these rural people, the material from the rural people also become very low end. So that's kind of like a small shift happened in 1980s.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, I'd like to hear a little bit more about what you found in the Hagley archives.
Yeah. I think there are two things I think are very, very helpful. On the one hand, the Dupont archive in 1980s very linked to my research, especially how oil being consumed, being commercialized, marketized. It gave me a very important picture to compare or evaluate what happened in China. So definitely there are two different ways. Besides this connected approach, also comparative approach provided by Dupont's archive in 1960s. Because during that time, I noticed there are several like material sample, like oolong sample. I can touch, I can sense, I can really understand what is 1960s fiber feels like. So this also very important. It gave me, because I also have some acrylic yarn in 1970s, so I can compare the sensory differences of two bonds collected fiber and the one I already collected from China. So this also comparative approach very relevant to my work. Yeah, basically this two connected approach, comparative approach, yeah, is what I get from Dupont's archive,
Mhm.
Hagley's archive.
Oh, that's really fascinating. How do you evaluate the sensory aspect of textiles
Mm.
to to divulge something useful in your research?
Okay, for example, I think that's a really specific question. For example, the sample I feel in Hagley archive is very how to say it's very thin. It's a very not really like plastic. It's very thin. It's also the elastic level is very high, which means this kind of like fiber can be used for cotton for very thin thread. But the one I filled in China, I collected in China, even though in 1970s, it's very hard, it's very tough. It only could be used for wool, not can be used for cotton. So this is very different. Also, different thickness of the fiber can decide how many threads can a yarn be produced from. For example, the one in Hagley archive can be have a three thread to make the yarn. But for the one in China, two thread already very thick, already kind of like a wool, like a wool yarn's thickness. So I think that's what I get from the sensory experience.
Mhm. Mhm. Was there a particular set of documents in the DuPont collection that really sort of made the light bulb go off, really helped you
Mm.
to get to get to your argument?
Um, I think there is a field called technical information about Orlon.
Mm,
Probably collect from 60s, 70s. That is very useful because it involves a lot um, equipment information, how to processing Orlon in downstreamer textile mills.
mm,
So that's give me a lot concrete information because the archive I found in China, they always the most machine is self-made. It's like the worker made by themselves, but they want to achieve the same performance. So I don't know what's the performance, what's a specific structural machine is what they want. But Hagley's archive, especially this Dupont technical uh, information, provide me a lot of detailed information so I can get more sense how material machine interaction happened in the past. So that's very helpful.
mm. Wow, that's really terrific. Um, I wonder whether your project has some implications for the present moment, when global consumer culture is so very thoroughly plasticized.
Mm, I think by far because I'm just a third year
Mm,
PhD, but I still have a long process to go. But by far, I think one thing I think very important for present life is handicraft, the relationship between craft and mechanical industry, mechanical technology. Because in many developing countries, for example, China in the past, doesn't have a lot of mechanical machines or equipment. So most work, even in the petrochemical industry, very heavy industry, most work done by manual, done by craft, done by handicraft process. So that's the thing quite something struck me a lot because I thought that probably only happened in the hand making manufacturing industry, but actually it's also happening in heavy industry. So I hope to argue around the relationship between machine and the manual work and material. So by far, I think this is a thing. This is a point I hope to explore more.
mm,
Oh, because now there even though a lot of country has already been industrialized, but still a lot developing economy area they are still pursuing industrialization. But what is industrialization? It's not about mechanization. It's also about handcraft, how to integrate the local handicraft into the industry. That's important. That also can be a point to generate to fight with unemployment in the local society. So I think that's the point by far. I think very important.
mhm. Well, Yaxi, what a fascinating project you have, and I really look forward to reading your dissertation when you've finished writing it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm still working on it, and the next year, I will do more oral history on those
Mm,
rural manufacturer, rural people, how they process, how they recycle. Hopefully, it can give me more inspiration about the recycling approach, recycling materials. So that's also important for the present life.
well, I will just mention
Thank
that
you.
Hagley has an oral history grant to support oral history projects. If you're interested, I can send you more information.
Oh yeah, that's great. Actually, in summer I met Roger. He mentioned this like an oral history collection. Yeah, that would be great. That will be very helpful. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. And thank you very much for speaking with me and sharing your work today.
Thank you.
And for the audience, if you would like more Hagley History Hangouts, more information on the Center for the History of Business, Technology, and Society at the Hagley Museum and Library, you can visit us online. You can go to hagley.org. That's HAGLEY.org. Don't be a stranger.